Hi, I'm Teresa Angerhofer, and lately I've been really interested in insect farming, which is raising insects for food for people and feed for livestock. So for my project, I created a label for a can of cricket powder, which you can see right here. So I've got my cricket powder, some information on the back about insect farming, and nutrition label and a recipe. Alright, so through this project, I hope to explain what insect farming is, why we should do it, and the challenges this emerging industry faces. In conclusion, I will wrap up with a case study of the impact cricket farming has had in Thailand. So, what is insect farming? As mentioned earlier, insect farming is mass-producing insects for the purpose of making them into food or feed. Insects have been eaten by humans for hundreds of years. They are still a very common food source for over 2 billion people in the world. In some places in Africa, people get 50% of their needed protein from insects. However, even though eating insects is really common, the insect farming industry is still very new. This is mostly to do with the fact that Westerners do not eat bugs. Today, I have to show you the benefits of eating insects and why I think eating bugs should be the next new trend. So, why should we eat insects? First, sustainability. Insects convert input resources much more efficiently into digestible food than other common protein sources like cattle and chicken. And that's because they're cold-blooded and don't have to put lots of energy into regulating their body temperature. So, you can see in this diagram, if I can bring it up, there we go, that cattle uses much more land, food, and water than insects down here at the bottom. A lot more. So by producing insects, you can cut down a lot of food, water, and land resources that would be needed to create the same amount of protein. Another great benefit to insects is that they can be fed with food industry byproducts and organic waste, which would reduce the amount of environmental waste. So one company in South Africa, AgriProtein, raises flies for livestock. So what they do is they feed their flies with spoiled food and manure, and so this is why they feed their flies to livestock and not people, because that is not appetizing. But anyway, so the little maggots eat all this food, and then afterwards they basically raise the flies, kill them, and then create protein out of them, and then they sell it as livestock feed. And then with the food that the flies ate, they convert it, or they make it into fertilizer, and then they sell it to other farms around the area. So I just think it's a really cool way to basically convert something that was going to just go into the trash into something that's useful. So just for example, Americans waste so much food. So if there was a way to just take that food and basically reuse it and make it a food source for insects, which then can be a food source for us, it's kind of this recycling, reusing, we'd see a lot less waste. So insects also produce a lot less greenhouse gases. So cattle production is actually the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases. So that's another great benefit. Secondly, food security. So the population is supposed to double by 2050. And so that's going to be a big challenge, because that means we need to find ways to get more food and make food more efficiently. And so that's what insects do. Insects create food more efficiently. They need less land, they need less food and water. So it's a sustainable way to get more of this food that we would need. They can also be used as a cheap feed source for livestock and aquaculture. Finally, another benefit to eating insects is that they are healthy. So I've got my little nutrition label here, but basically they contain many necessary proteins, fiber, monosaturated fats, vitamins, and essential micronutrients and minerals. They also produce a comparable amount of protein as cattle, but with a lot less fat, which could lead to a regression in obesity rates. Alright, so those were the benefits. Now, what are the challenges to the insect farming industry, and how should they be addressed? So, mass-producing insects is still a very new industry. Because of that, they haven't discovered the most efficient ways to farm them yet. Also, the industry generally relies on a lot more human labor, because there just isn't the technology and automation which would allow them to produce these insects more efficiently. So that means that production costs can be a lot higher than in other industries. So for example, in dairy industries, they have like automatic cow milking machines. So you kind of just set up the cow there and it milks it for them. So you don't have to have a lot of trained personnel who milk the cows like at 4 a.m. every single morning. So in insect farming, they don't have all these cool technologies that would make their life easier. And so that's why we see most of these small businesses in lower income countries. So in order to overcome these challenges, there needs to be a lot more investment in this industry and more research and technology. And I think it makes a lot of sense because this is our future. This is like a great solution to many of the problems we're facing. So I think we should invest a lot more in it. Secondly, there are also a lot of restrictions on insect farming and a lot of regulations, especially in Western countries. So for example, Australia has very strict laws on which insects come in, and it makes sense kind of because insects can bring in some disease, but it makes it very challenging for small companies like AEB3671, which I mentioned earlier, to export their insect products to other countries and expand their markets. So finally, the most obvious challenge is that, well, Westerners find eating bugs disgusting, and so there's not a large market for it in Western culture. Also, fun fact, Westerners actually eat a lot of bugs without even realizing it. So on the average American eats about 2 pounds of dead insects per year. And that's just because insect parts find their way into traditional foods because they can't clean everything off. So you find insect parts in vegetables and your pasta, stuff like that. And actually, so I'm sorry to ruin this for everyone, but according to the FDA regulations, chocolate can contain up to 60 insect parts per 100 grams before it's considered defective. So even your chocolate can contain insect parts. But anyway, so the way to combat this is to market bugs to the Westerners in products that are convenient, acceptable, and in familiar form. So this means like a cricket granola bar. Like I would be fine with eating that, or protein powder, or cricket powder. So actually on here I've added a little recipe for cricket banana bread. So you basically add cricket flour and then flour and all these other ingredients and you can make a very delicious cricket bread. So I haven't tried it, but it does not actually sound that disgusting. And I mean, I would definitely prefer to eat a piece of cricket banana bread than a roasted cricket. I feel like that's a little too advanced for me at this point. But it's kind of this idea of you present insect protein kind of in this familiar form to Westerners, so it's not as disgusting for them. All right, so finally I wanted to discuss the cricket industry in Thailand. So Thailand is one of those places where eating insects is common. So I actually found this really hilarious. But around 1978, they actually had this huge like locust infestation. And so what the government did to try to combat this is they basically encouraged everyone. It's like, oh, you can just eat the locust for food. And so within a few years, they completely got rid of their pest problem. And there were actually farmers producing corn, which is what they were feeding on, in order to attract these locusts. So that's one way to fix a problem. Anyway, so Thailand is the largest producer of crickets worldwide. It receives revenue of around 1.14 million US dollars per year. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but as I mentioned, this industry is still growing. So I looked at one study that interviewed cricket farmers around Thailand. So this is where I'm getting most of this information. So among these farmers, the average experience for cricket farming was around 2.5 years, which really is not much at all. What I found interesting is the way kind of how cricket farming was spread. So basically there was this researchers from this one university, like Kain, something like that. I totally butchered it. Sorry. Basically went out and taught these rural communities how to farm crickets. And so from there, these people, and so a couple of farmers would start farming crickets. And then other people in the rural communities would realize, wow, cricket farming is actually a very profitable business. I kind of want to get started with that. And so then those cricket farmers would start teaching their neighbors and their friends how to cricket farm. So it was kind of just like this spreading thing. And I thought that was actually really cool because even though they realized that if they produced a lot, or like if everyone produced a lot of crickets, it would decrease the value of crickets, like they still taught them anyway. Also, it seems that cricket farming is more of a side business than an actual big industry for people. So generally, their main income that they get is from like agriculture, so like rice farming and different crops as well. But because cricket farming is actually really good right now because it's profitable, because demand for crickets is ever increasing, and also you can raise crickets year round, and unlike other crops, traditional crops like rice, which you only have a certain crops throughout the year. So what I found interesting is that also there's around like 50% of the people in the business are actually women. So it's empowering women to form their own businesses and stuff like that. So when their husbands go off to work in the cities, then they can provide for their own home, for themselves in their own home. I found it interesting. So generally, because it is a side business, farmers use the income to pay off their debts, use it to send their kids to university, or save it for future expenses. So actually on my label, I added some information about Thailand, so like supporting Thai cricket farmers and their communities. So basically what I was trying to do here is saying like, oh, so my company funds all these sustainable projects in Thailand, so if you buy my product, then you're actually helping the sustainable development in Thailand. So I hope you learned a little more about insect farming and will agree with me that bugs should be the next new trend in our food industry, because of their role to promote sustainability and solve food security issues. Thank you, and just one more look at my beautiful label. All right, and you can find that, I posted that in my discussion post as well. All right, bye.